I've been in business for 10 years now, and there are three huge mistakes that I've made that cost me time, money, and my sanity. And I want to tell you what pisses me off the most about it. I see smart entrepreneurs all of the time making these exact same mistakes. And it's not because they're careless. It's not because they aren't trying hard enough. It's because their ADHD type brain is wired to make these decisions feel like the right thing to do. And every single one of these felt natural for me at the time, as I'm sure they will be for you right now. And every single one of them was slowly destroying my business instead of building it. So let me walk you through each one. Let's start with the first one that I convinced myself made me professional. Complexity. I genuinely believe that complexity meant sophistication. That if my business had multiple offers, multiple funnels, multiple systems all running simultaneously, it meant I was building a credible business, something that looked and felt real. And the ADHD brain loves this. It's designed for dopamine, which means that we often add lots of things to our plate all the time. Multiple projects makes us feel like we're in a state of momentum. Constantly having loads of moving parts makes us feel like we're making progress. But here's what actually happened. Everything either broke or it fell into complete chaos. And I couldn't see it happening because the complexity itself made it impossible for me to diagnose what was broken inside of my business at the time. Now, I want you to think about it like this. If you've got one pipeline and it's not converting, you'll know exactly where to look. But if you've got 5 different offers, 3 different lead magnets, 2 different sales processes, and 4 different ways that people can work with you, good luck figuring out which is actually causing the problem. Now, at this time in my business, I'd spend weeks trying to work out why my revenue had all of a sudden dropped. I'd be sitting there thinking, was it the messaging? Was it the offer? Was it a problem with my avatar or my audience? Or my follow-up sequence or funnel? To be frank, I didn't have a fucking clue because there were too many variables to isolate the actual issue. But here's where it gets worse. The complexity wasn't just making problems invisible and hiding them. It was actively creating them. Every new system that I created needed maintaining. Every new offer that I thought of needed creating and marketing. Every new funnel needed building and then constantly monitoring. Turns out I was spending more time managing the complexity itself than I was actually spending time serving clients or creating real value in the marketplace. And as I said earlier, the ADHD brain thinks that this is productive. All that activity, all of those spinning plates, they are false signals of movement because the movement is motion, not momentum. And motion without momentum is exhaustion dressed up as work. So when I eventually recognized this and I saw what kind of an impact this was having on both my brain and my business, I stripped everything back to simplicity again. I stripped out everything that wasn't fundamentally essential, and I boiled it all down to the bare necessities. As a result, I created one core offer, one clear process, one way in, one way through, and then one way out. And suddenly everything became easier. It became easier to articulate to the marketplace what I offered and what I was doing. Easier to manage operationally. And most importantly, it was easier then to see what was broken and how I needed to fix it. The blockage in the pipe became obvious because there was only one pipe that I was looking at. And that's exactly why I created the straight line business model, which is now how I design my business and help my clients to build, which is fundamentally built upon the philosophy of removing all chaos and complexity. We subtract rather than add, and we aggressively simplify. We make sure that there is a straight through line between everything within the business, making it both easy to grow and easy to diagnose where the problems and chaos are living. Because at the end of the day, complexity is what's going to kill momentum for you. And the ADHD type brain needs simplicity to survive. Now let's move on to the second mistake. And this one is subtle because it doesn't feel like you're actually making a mistake when you're making it. Truth be told, I used to make decisions based on how I felt rather than what data was actually telling me. Now this may sound obvious now, but at the time, it wasn't so obvious because my feelings felt like valid information in the moment. And this is especially true for ADHD type brains because we are highly attuned to environment, to energy, and to our emotional state. If I felt like something was working, I would double down on it. And if I felt like something wasn't working, I would kill it. Now, this is a problem because I was constantly guessing my progress. I was constantly wondering why things weren't working when I'd made decisions that had felt right. But the reality is that feelings lie. Now, not maliciously, but they lie nevertheless. There were times that I thought I was absolutely crushing it. My energy was at an all-time high. Engagement felt good in the marketplace. And I was getting great feedback in conversations. So as a result, I would make decisions based on that feeling. I'd invest more time, money, and resources into whatever was generating me that feeling. And then I'd look at the actual data 3 months later, and I'd realize that nothing had moved and nothing had grown. My revenue was pretty much the same because the thing that I felt so good about wasn't actually producing any tangible results. It was just making me feel good. But it works the other way too. There were also periods where I felt like everything was falling apart. My energy was really low. Things felt quiet. I was pretty uninspired. And as a result, I'd make decisions from that place. Now, this caused me to pivot too early, killing things that were actually working. I changed the strategy when, looking back now, I probably should have stayed the course. And then 6 months later, I'd look back at the data from that period and I realized I was actually doing better than I'd done before. But I just felt shit about it, so I assumed it wasn't working. And the consequence was that I made the wrong decisions at critical moments within my business. Decisions that would have been completely different if I'd have had the objective data instead of just the subjective feeling. And this is where the hunter brain needs guardrails, because your instinct is incredible for creativity, for pattern recognition, for reading people. But for business decisions, for resource allocation, for strategic direction, you're going to need data and not feelings. So now for me, the rule is pretty simple. I use feelings for creativity and I use data for decisions. My hunter brain gets free rein when I'm creating content, I'm designing offers, or I'm working with clients in conversations. When it comes to what's working and what needs to change inside of my business, I only use data. Now let's move on to the third and final mistake. And this is the one that nearly destroyed me in the process of building my business. Everything used to live in my head. We're talking processes, systems, client details, content ideas, to-do list, strategic plans, billing cycles. All of it was stored internally. And at the time, I didn't realize what kind of a consequence this was having on both me and my business. Because, truth be told, it felt normal. Dare I say, efficient even. Why would I write something down when I could just remember it? Why create a system when I already knew how to do it? And as I looked at other entrepreneurs, this is what I believed that they were doing as well. But everything living in my head meant I was continuously using a massive amount of cognitive capacity just to hold that information in my head, let alone use it. Think about your laptop trying to run with 47 tabs open, 6 applications running in the background, you've got CapCut open, and no RAM left for actual work. Well, that was my brain, constantly trying to maintain this massive mental archive of everything that I needed to remember. What processes come next? What was that conversation I had with that client last week, and what did I promise them? Where were they in their billing cycles? What do I need to create for next week's content? All of this was taking up precious space, and all of it was demanding my attention, ultimately draining my mental capacity. And an important note to recognize is that ADHD type brains aren't even particularly good at this in the first place. We are not built for long-term storage and retrieving. We are built for creative connections and pattern recognition. You see, I was using my brain like a filing cabinet, and I realized I couldn't actually remember what half of my business was supposed to do anyway. I'd built them once upon a time. I knew that they were probably important, but the specifics around how to use them had gone. So I'd have to reconstruct them from scratch every time that something broke. I can't tell you how many times I've rebuilt a CRM system, a financial tracker, or something like that. And this ultimately meant that I constantly had to reinvent solutions to problems that I'd already solved before, which looking back on it now is absolute madness. So my approach now is that everything gets externalized. All processes are documented. All systems are recorded. Anything that I would have previously relied on my memory for gets captured in some form of notes. My kill list, which is my to-do list, is external. Content ideas are stored immediately as soon as they arise and inspiration strikes. And my strategic growth plans are written down and stored somewhere so I can actually come back to it. Nothing lives in my head that doesn't need to be there. And the difference is night and day. It means that I have so much more brain space, which leads to better performance. I have more capacity for actual thinking and problem solving instead of just storing information. I have more energy for creativity instead of this archival maintenance. And this is what I built the Hunter OS around. Externalizing everything so your hunter brain can do what it's actually designed to do. So here's what connects all 3 of these mistakes. Your ADHD type brain naturally gravitates towards every single one of them. That's why they existed for me in the first place, and that's why they likely do for you as well. Complexity feels sophisticated because your brain loves novelty and stimulation. Your feelings feel trustworthy because your brain is highly attuned to emotional data. Internal storage feels efficient because externalizing feels like more friction. It feels like more work. But what feels natural isn't what always works best, especially when you're a hunter brain trying to operate in systems that were built for a completely different brain type. These neurotypical entrepreneurs can manage complexity because their brain handles systematic thinking differently. They can trust their feelings more because their emotional regulation is naturally more stable. They can store information internally because their working memory functions very differently to ours. But us, we are wired differently. And that isn't a flaw, it is a feature. But only if you build systems that work with your wiring instead of against it. And these 3 mistakes will continue to persist because they align with how your brain wants to operate in the short term, how it thinks you should operate or how it thinks it should be operating. But they destroy your capacity in the long term. Complexity reduces your ability to diagnose problems correctly and accurately in your business. Making feelings-based decisions creates unpredictable outcomes. That's why everything feels so volatile and turbulent. And internal storage drains the cognitive capacity that you need to actually do creative work, the things that likely make your business stand out and drive revenue. So the shift isn't about working harder or being more disciplined. It's about recognizing this pattern that you are likely experiencing too, and understanding that your natural inclination towards these three things is actually a mismatch between your wiring and the environment that you're currently operating in. Look, I just want to reiterate that these aren't character flaws. They are just wiring mismatches. Your brain is just trying to run on an operating system that wasn't designed for how you process information. And the straight line business model addresses the complexity problem by forcing simplification. It helps you to create one clear path from stranger to client to result, getting rid of complexity, the chaos, the confusion. And the Hunter OS addresses the other two mistakes by externalizing everything and building decision frameworks around data instead of feeling. This means that your brain gets to do what it's designed to do. And it took me 10 years to learn this. 10 years of making these mistakes over and over again. 10 years of wondering why things felt right but kept producing shit results. Now, you don't need 10 years. You just need to recognize the pattern that I've explained to you today and learn from my mistakes. And then you can build systems that work with your brain instead of against it. And that is how you're going to build a business that is designed for focus, flow, and freedom.